Revealed, how one incredible black maid transformed life for a millionaire's newlywed wife. Alice Parker, now Mrs. James Parker, felt like a grand illusion among the gleaming spires of wealth rising around her. The manicured lawns of Meadowbrook Estates were impossibly perfect, each blade of grass trimmed to perfection, every rose in luxurious bloom, much like the lives of the elite she now found herself entangled in. But behind the smiles and sparkling chandeliers, Alice felt an aching emptiness in her chest. She walked the halls of her husband's mansion, a castle draped in luxury, feeling like a fish swimming upstream in a sea of opulence. Amidst this world of designer labels and extravagant soirees, a ray of warmth came in the form of Ruth. She was the maid, a woman whose presence radiated strength. Ruth's laughter was like music, a harmonious note that broke the silence of extravagance surrounding Alice. Each time Alice found herself struggling, it was Ruth who noticed the tightness in her shoulders and the frown lines etched across her forehead. Their conversations, casual at first, soon revealed the depths of Alice's loneliness. "Child of the suburbs, you might have those diamonds," Ruth said one afternoon, her hands busy folding linens, "but it's the connections that shine brightest." And Alice felt that. She could taste the truth on her tongue. With Ruth, she could breathe again, free from the polished masks of her elite peers. Before we continue, I need to let you know about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, hit that bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can drop a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. But Alice's heart sank under the weight of her newfound friendship when her social circle began to murmur, perched on their high horses of privilege. "Can you believe she actually likes spending time with that maid?" The words sliced through the air with cruel precision, as they mingled in pack-like camaraderie. The whispers wrapped around Alice like a chainsaw, and she felt every bit of tension pull at her heartstrings. Then came the spring festival, a dazzling display of color that blanketed the town in joy. Alice stood there, starry-eyed, against the backdrop of festoons and laughter. But beneath that veneer of happiness was her turmoil, her friends discussing Ruth as if she were invisible, their disdain cloaked in polite laughter. And then, something incredible unfolded. Ruth stepped forward, a hidden talent emerging like a phoenix from the ashes. Her performance was breathtaking, her voice filling the air, so alive and vibrant, it broke the atmosphere. Gasps rippled through the audience. Alice's heart raced. She could feel the tide of change sweeping through the crowd. But then she caught her friends' sideways glances, their sneers crouching in the corners. Alice found herself at a crossroads, heart thumping, torn between the shimmering facade of wealth and the undeniable bond with Ruth. Here, at this pivotal moment, she pondered what was truly worth more, her place in high society or the authenticity blooming within her soul. As she stood among bright balloons and clinking champagne glasses, her pulse quickened. Would she brave the judgment of her peers to defend the woman who had become her confidant? The question loomed like an unanswered prayer, and Alice realized the answer might change everything. As applause erupted around her, she could feel the weight of their expectations pressing down. It was time for her to choose. What would she do next? Alice's heart thrummed loudly in her chest, the applause ringing in her ears like an urgent call to action. She stood frozen, caught in a moment that seemed to stretch infinitely. Ruth, the woman who had lifted her out of a deep loneliness, was standing at center stage, radiating triumph and grace. But all Alice could see were her friends, their eyes narrowed against the backdrop of the joyous celebration, their silent judgment hanging heavy in the air. The cheers around her faded into a dull roar as she waded through the sea of thoughts. What would it mean if she stepped forward? Could she truly stand up to the tidal wave of expectation crashing down on her? The initial thrill of Ruth's performance began to ebb, replaced by the cold pulse of anxiety. Just then, Ruth glanced back at her, a knowing smile on her lips. For a moment, their eyes locked, and Alice felt a rush of courage ignite within her. The warmth of their friendship wrapped around her like a cozy blanket in the midst of an ice storm. The connection they shared felt more vital than any social standing. It struck her then it wasn't just about defending Ruth, it was about embracing her own identity. Taking a deep breath, she stepped forward, her feet aching but determined. The crowd still buzzed, unaware of the inner battle raging within her. The whispers echoed in her mind, urging her to retreat, to conform. But Alice could feel the energy swelling around Ruth, vibrant and electric. It electrified her own resolve. As if propelled by an unseen force, she raised her voice above the murmur, "Ruth. That was beautiful." A pause fell over the crowd, an unexpected hush that made Alice's heart race. The laughter stopped. All eyes turned to her, surprise mingling with curiosity. She took another step closer to the stage, her own insecurities unraveling one by one. "You have an incredible gift," she continued, her voice trembling but growing firmer with each word. "What you shared with us today resonates far more than the glitter we wear." Gasps flowed through the onlookers, a mixture of disbelief and intrigue. The tension in the air thickened as Alice's statement hung there, rich with unspoken truths. Amidst the silence, Ruth's face broke into a radiant smile, reflecting a deep gratitude that pierced Alice's heart. This wasn't just a moment for Ruth, it was a moment for Alice too. She was no longer just an accessory to the fabric of elite life, she was a part of something real. But not everyone was pleased. Alice caught the icy glare of her closest friend, Marianne, whose thinly veiled disgust seemed to cut through the stunned crowd like a knife. It was a warning, a reminder of the life Alice used to fit into. A life that praised appearances over authenticity. Alice felt her stomach twist. The choice before her was clearer now: keep her place in the privilege she had known or forge a path of sincerity that felt infinitely more rewarding. The laughter faded, replaced by a heavy heartbeat echoing in her ears. "Are you really willing to do this?" She heard a small voice whisper inside her. The question loomed, amplifying her realization that embracing her friendship with Ruth was as much a rebellion against her old life as it was a declaration of her newfound freedom. Alice's heart pounded harder as she reached out for Ruth's hand, their fingers intertwining. "Thank you for being brave," she said softly, their bond sealing the whispered promise of loyalty between them. But she knew the stakes would rise. How would her world react? Just then, Alice scanned the gathering crowd, searching for familiar faces, each filled with skepticism and uncertainty. As they watched, she understood this choice might unravel everything she once held dear. And yet, the thrill of possibility quickened her pulse. She was ready to step into the unknown, but could she stand firm against the storm that was bound to follow? With a deep breath, she raised her chin, ready to face whatever would come next. A low murmur swept through the room as Alice held Ruth's hand tightly, the warmth radiating between them a barrier against the judgment-filled stares from the crowd. The uncertainty lingered in the air, thick and suffocating. She could feel her heart in her throat, beating rapidly as the weight of her choice bore down on her. This was a moment of truth, not just for Ruth, but for herself. "What have you done?" came a voice, piercing like a sharp blade through the uncertainty. It was Marianne, her tone laced with disbelief and a hint of anger. "Alice, you can't be serious." The crowd buzzed again, whispers cascading through the air, snipping off Alice's fragile courage. She turned towards Marianne, whose face was taut with concern and wrath. Golden hair framed her face, but there was nothing bright about the glare she wore. "I'm serious, Marianne. We can't just stand by and watch this kind of talent go ignored," Alice replied, her voice steadier than she felt. Each word landed with more conviction, like stones building the foundation of a new path. "Ruth deserves our support." Marianne stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper that sliced through the noise. "Do you really think this is what you want? To be seen with her here?" Alice felt the flicker of doubt. It was true, she had always wanted to fit in, to be part of the glittery, polished world. But now, standing here, surrounded by the truth of the moment, she couldn't go back. "Ruth is my friend, Alice insisted, her voice rising. And that's what matters. Ruth's eyes sparkled with appreciation, and her smile widened, bringing a warmth to Alice's heart that pushed back the shadows of doubt. Yet behind that light, she could feel the looming storm, the disapproval of the elite crowd stretching like dark clouds overhead. Is this your first act of defiance? Ruth's voice cut through the tension, full of mischief and challenge. You've stepped off the cliff, Alice. Now you've got to fly. The crowd stood wrapped in a silence punctuated only by the sharp intake of breaths. Uncertainty rippled through them, leaving Alice feeling naked. There was no turning back now. But just as quickly as that thought arose, a flicker of determination sparked within. Were they watching for her failure? Were they expecting her to retrench and plead for forgiveness, to cling back to the safety of conformity? No. She proclaimed, feeling a wave of power surging through her. We need more moments like this. This celebration shows us who we can be when we embrace our truth. With her words echoing in the hall, she saw Ruth's face glow with admiration. The barriers of class and pretense began to crack, tiny at first, then deeper with every heartbeat. Alice smiled at Ruth again, feeling a sense of liberation unlike anything she'd felt before. But her resolve was challenged again, this time by the disapproving gaze of her parents in the crowd. Their faces reflected a mixture of confusion and dismay, a striking contrast to the warmth she felt with Ruth. Would they ever understand? Would they reject the transformation unfolding right before them? Mom, Dad, please, she pleaded silently with her eyes. But they remained unmoved, the chill of their judgment settling in. Would their disappointment cut her deeper than any words could? The clamor of whispers intensified, swirling around her and tightening the knot in her stomach. It was clear now, the applause she had felt earlier was mixed with support and scorn. As the tension climbed, Alice took a deep, steadying breath. Perhaps they could embrace change, they could forge a new way of thinking together. But first, she had to figure out how to help Ruth break through those judgments, how to stand her ground against not just the crowd, but her family, the life she'd known. And in that instant, she wondered if her new freedom would cost her everything or if it would lead her to even greater heights than she dared to imagine. She needed to know where this path would lead. Could Alice truly transform not just her own life, but the lives of those around her? Alice took a step back, her heart racing as she scanned the crowd again, feeling the weight of their judgment like an oppressive cloud. Each gaze was like an arrow, piercing through her resolve. She searched for Ruth, who stood strong beside her, unyielding in the face of the backlash. That familiar spark was still there, but now it seemed to flicker in the wind, needing Alice's steady hand to thrive. Look, Alice, Marianne urged, her voice layered with a mix of concern and disbelief, these people won't understand. You're throwing yourself into the fire. What about the future you've been dreaming of? The one everyone expects from you? Alice flinched as a chill raced down her spine. The future? The pristine vision of her life had always included a gilded cage, the perfect marriage, society galas, and a life untouched by the raw grit of reality. But here, right beside her, stood a truth that pulled on her heartstrings with stronger force than her carefully laid plans. I know what they expect, Alice said, her voice trembling slightly but resolute. And that's why I can't go down that path anymore. Then what path are you on? Marianne pressed, her voice nearly a whisper, as if afraid to awaken the honesty in Alice's heart, even more than it already was. What does this even mean? Ruth squeezed Alice's hand, the contact igniting a flame within her. It means I'm choosing courage, Alice responded. Maybe not for me alone, but for Ruth and anyone else who feels trapped. The words rang clear, resonating through the tension. But before she could bask in her own courage, the crowd erupted. Murmurs transformed into outright whispers, unsure and jagged, like shards of glass scraping against skin. Suddenly, several familiar faces turned away, shaking their heads in disapproval. Ruth doesn't belong in our world, one murmured, another added, she's just a maid. Alice felt the heat rise in her chest, her mind racing. How could they belittle someone so genuine? Someone who had shown her kindness when no one else had. Who is it that defines belonging? Alice shot back, her own voice now fierce and unyielding. Is it wealth? Titles? Or is it shared humanity, shared experiences? With every heartbeat, Alice felt more alive. Every rejection from the crowd turned into fuel, pushing her to speak louder, pushing her to take a deeper stand. And yet, fear simmered just below the surface. What if the walls built around her quickly rushed back in? What if she lost everyone she loved, her parents, her friends? For a moment, the room hushed. All eyes turned toward the stage, where Alice stood, a beacon against the darkness of judgment. At that moment, she was more than just a daughter or a friend, she was a voice for change, igniting flickers of hope in others as well. Let us embrace our truths together, Alice continued, feeling the need to keep going. Let us step out of the shadows and allow our hearts to guide us. As she spoke, she could see life in Ruth's eyes. They flickered with unbound possibility, painting the scene with vibrant colors even the grayest crowd could not ignore. But as the change sparkled around them, another voice broke through. You don't know what you're asking for. It was her mother, now standing at the edge of the crowd, eyes wide and stricken. Her heart sank. Could she reach her parents? Or would this be the final fracture to their relationship? Mom, Alice began, but her voice faltered under the weight of her mother's disappointment. With every second, the air thickened, and shadows deepened. The decision ahead loomed, threatening to crush her newfound strength before it could grow. Would she still be able to fly, or was she destined to fall? A heartbeat went by, and then another. The crowd waited for her response, the silence swelling like a tide. Will you stand with me, or will you let fear decide for you? As uncertainty hung around her, Alice felt the tremor of potential in the air, holding her breath, ready for the world to respond. Would her choice advocate for a deeper truth, or would it all come crashing down? Alice's heart thudded loudly in her chest as she faced the crowd, a wave of conflicting emotions crashing over her. Silence held them in its grip, and for the first time, she could see more than just disapproval reflected in their eyes, there was curiosity, perhaps even hope. She took a deep breath, feeling Ruth's presence grounding her. Please, she pleaded, her voice rising above the noise. I'm not asking you to change your beliefs overnight. I'm asking you to see Ruth for who she truly is, a person who deserves respect, just as much as any one of us does. Ruth's grip tightened on Alice's hand. The moment felt fragile, like a seedling in a storm. As Alice looked into Ruth's eyes, she saw a flicker of resilience, a spark that mirrored her own. What if we're wrong about each other? Alice continued, her voice steady now, as if she were standing on the edge of a cliff and daring to leap. What if we built our identities on expectations and lies? The room stirred, murmurs rippling like water through the crowd. Faces contorted in confusion battled with remnants of their doubt, while glances exchanged between onlookers hinted at a dawning realization. That's it. Marianne finally burst out, her voice cutting through the murmur. Alice is right. We've been so blind. Alice's breath hitched. Could she really be changing minds here? She saw families nudging one another, saw expressions shifting. Behind the whispers were seeds of revelation, sprouting amidst ignorance. But then, her mother stepped closer, her face a whirlwind of emotion. Alice, you're being naive, she said, voice trembling. You can't just upset the order of things. You want to be accepted, not here. Not with Ruth. Alice cut in, disbelief coloring her tone. This is what I want, Mom. I know I'm risking everything, but I refuse to live in a world where love is conditional. Gasps traveled through the crowd, the words seeming to hang in the air, provoking contemplation. Could it be true that love could weave through their barriers, making the impossible possible? The familiar faces of her parents brought tears to her eyes. I want my future to be based on the people I love, not on wealth or status, she whispered, vulnerable but determined. You taught me to stand up for what's right, to not be afraid of my heart. This is me stepping into the truth. Tension thickened again, pressing against her chest. A shuffling sound caught her attention. Was that a footstep forward? Finally, Ruth spoke, her voice soft yet fierce. You have a right to choose who you love. No matter what the world thinks, no one can dictate your heart. Alice felt the warmth of Ruth's words wrap around her like a blanket. It was a call to authenticity, a challenge to reject shame and embrace courage together. Let us forge a different path, Alice said, the conviction in her voice rising anew. Just as the atmosphere seemed poised for resolution, a heartfelt plea emerged from the crowd. But what about us? What about our lives? Our traditions? A voice echoed, revealing both fear and longing for connecting in a time of change. Do you mean more to me than the traditions we cling to? Alice shot back gently but firmly, causing murmurs to ripple through the crowd again. It was a moment of reckoning. A choice hung in the air. Would they allow the walls of their world to crumble, or would they remain shackled to outdated beliefs? Alice took a step forward, every muscle in her body alive with purpose. She had opened a door, but would anyone follow her through it? Would they stand together, united? The silence deepened, the answer lingering just out of reach, as she waited for the crowd to decide their fate and her own. Would Alice's courage spark a revolution in hearts, or would it be drowned out by fear and tradition? The crowd shifted, tension crackling in the air like static before a storm. Alice could feel every eye upon her, every breath held in anticipation. She glanced at Ruth, who wore a determined yet vulnerable expression. Their hands remained clasped, a silent promise of solidarity amidst the swirling uncertainty. Then, an elder man, Mr. Thompson, rose to his feet. His weathered face, lined with years of tradition, was etched in concentration. I've known many of you since we were kids, he began, his voice steady. We've always believed that family and duty come before all else. But he hesitated, glancing down as if weighing his next words carefully. But what if Alice is right? His admission hung in the air like a fragile glass ornament, both beautiful and precarious. The murmurs took on a different tone, sparking a flicker of hope in Alice's chest. Was it possible that they were on the brink of something transformative? You're talking about shaking the foundations of our community, a woman called out from the back, her arms crossed defensively. How can we just throw away everything we've ever known? Alice's heart raced. The challenge was clear, but the determination blazing within her made her want to push back. What if the foundations we've built are not made of love, but fear? She countered. What if they keep us from truly knowing each other? From growing? The room fell into a heavy silence, as if her words had touched a nerve. A ripple of uncertainty ran through the crowd. Protective anchors to the past wavered ever so slightly. It's hard, isn't it? A voice piped up from the side, a young girl, no older than 16, standing awkwardly by her parents. To think that we might have been wrong. I mean, I've always been told that what I believe is right. Alice felt a pang of empathy for the girl. She was young, filled with hope but weighed down by expectations. It's okay to question everything, Alice said gently, her voice soothing yet assertive. That's how we find out what's real. We're all learning together. A ripple of nods passed through the crowd. Alice drank in the sight of it. Could this be the beginning of true understanding? The once frozen expressions began to thaw, just a little. Then, Alice's mother stepped forward again, her hands trembling slightly. Your father and I raised you to uphold our family values. Are you telling me that love is stronger than tradition? Tradition has its place, Mom, Alice replied, her voice steady yet filled with warmth. But it should never overshadow love. We should be celebrating love, not denying it. I'm sure some of you have experienced love that was hidden, shameful, and it didn't bring you joy. It brought pain. Alice could see several heads bobbing in tentative agreement. For the first time, she felt a flicker of hope that things could change. Suddenly, Ruth stepped forward, her voice fierce as she addressed the crowd. I am not asking you to give up your traditions, but to look at them through new eyes. To embrace love without fear of what others may say. Alice watched as Ruth's words echoed in the hearts of those gathered. A transformation was brewing. The barriers that separated them were beginning to crack. Just then, an unexpected voice pierced through the lingering silence. Marianne again, her voice stronger this time. We have to talk. My brother, is he truly happy? Or has he just been pretending? Gasps erupted as many realized the deeper implications of those words. Was it time to confront their unspoken truths? Alice's heart raced, knowing this could lead to real discussions, real changes, but also real pain. Would they dare to question all they believed? Would Alice and Ruth's moment of vulnerability lead to the heartfelt conversations necessary for healing? The tension hung in the air, thick and electric. Alice felt the weight of anticipation pressing down on her, knowing deep down that a crack had opened, and she could only hope they would choose to step through into the light. Marianne's question echoed through the hall, a wake-up call that charged the atmosphere with an urgency that few could ignore. Faces turned toward her, the weight of her words sinking in, and the gathering shifted, almost as if the air itself had changed. Unease mixed with curiosity, and Alice could sense the collective heartbeat of the crowd racing alongside her own. How long can we keep pretending? Marianne continued, her voice wavering slightly but strong enough to command attention. My brother has always been so good at hiding his pain. We can't keep brushing things under the rug. Not anymore. Her eyes shone with unshed tears, vulnerability transparent. Alice could see glimmers of understanding spreading through the crowd. It was as if a gate had opened, allowing the muted emotions of the past to flood out. People glanced at one another, searching for reassurance and strength in shared vulnerability. Before another voice could respond, Ruth stepped forward, heart on her sleeve. What Marianne is saying is important. We all have our own truths hidden away, fears that we bury under layers of this so-called tradition. Her eyes scanned the audience, landing on different faces, urging them to listen. What happens when we stop hiding? What if sharing who we are brings us closer together? An elder man nodded slowly, his expression softened by decades of unasked questions. I remember when my own son came out to me. I was scared, terrified of what it would mean for him and for us. But I've never felt prouder than when I chose to accept him for who he is. His voice broke slightly. It was only then that I learned what real love is. The air shifted again. Heads nodded, a sense of camaraderie began to weave itself through the audience. The grounds of fear were crumbling bit by bit, replaced by the fragile foundations of hope. I didn't know, shouted a middle-aged woman, shaking her head. I thought I was protecting my children by pushing them toward normalcy. I feared the shame. But now, as a mother, I think of the shame I might be in causing them losing their authentic selves. Her voice trembled, revealing the ache of regret. Alice's heart swelled. Every revelation brought them closer to healing, more powerful than the barriers that had kept them apart for so long. It was as if the scars of the past began to dissolve, allowing room for something powerful to emerge. Ruth took a step closer to Alice. We're scared of speaking out, she said quietly, yet her words reverberated through the crowd. But silence is a disease. It festers and grows until it chokes out love. A murmur of agreement rippled through the gathering, and Alice looked around, her heart pounding with hope. They were collectively shedding their fears, ready to embrace truth. Then, an unexpected voice broke in, deeper and gruff. Do you think what we're doing here will change anything? The man's skepticism sent a shiver of doubt down Alice's spine. He was standing at the back, uncertainty etched across his features. It's a nice thought, but how do we move forward? Alice caught her breath. This was the moment. The push and pull of confrontation lay before her, and she knew she had to answer not just for herself, but for everyone gathered there. We move forward by recognizing that real love is a choice we make every day, she said firmly. When we choose love, we choose to let go of judgment. We choose to support each other through all the ups and downs. The crowd fell silent, absorbing her words. A ripple of contemplation passed through them. Was love strong enough to dissolve the barriers they'd erected? There was a long pause, and Alice felt hope hanging palpably in the air. Would they choose to challenge their fears and step toward a new beginning? In that moment of uncertainty, Alice sensed the intensity rising once again, knowing the stakes had never been higher. Would they unite in love and acceptance, or would the tradition be too hard to shake? The answer loomed ahead, beckoning them to take that next step into the unknown. The silence stretched, heavy with anticipation. Alice scanned the faces, from the skeptical man at the back to the tear-streaked cheeks of Marianne. Everyone seemed to be holding their breath, the collective weight of unspoken truths hanging in the air. Just then, a young woman named Lisa stepped forward, her hands trembling slightly at her sides. What if we started small? She ventured. What if we each shared just one thing, something real, something we've hidden? A ripple of murmurs spread through the crowd, and a flicker of hope ignited in Alice's heart. It felt like they were on the brink of something significant. They were ready to break the silence, ready to unveil the layers they had carefully constructed over the years. Marianne took a step closer to Lisa, her eyes wide with a mix of admiration and determination. "I like that idea," she said softly. "Sharing could be our first step toward healing." The elder man who had spoken earlier raised his hand again. "I'll go first," he said, his voice steady yet kind. "When my son came out, I was afraid. Afraid of losing him, afraid of judgment. But the hardest part wasn't his truth, it was mine. I had to confront my own biases and fears. I had to acknowledge that in trying to protect him, I was actually denying him love." His words struck deep chords within the audience, and Alice felt the weight of his honesty resonate. There was strength in vulnerability. Next, a woman Alice recognized from the neighborhood stepped forward, her voice cracking with emotion. "I lost my sister because I never accepted her for who she was," she confessed. "I thought I was being a good sister by encouraging her to fit in. But in reality, I pushed her away. She needed my support, not my judgment." Gasps of surprise spread through the group. It was as if they were all suddenly naked in their honesty, bearing their secrets for the first time. For each revelation, Alice felt walls cracking, letting in light, revealing the beauty of shared humanity. One by one, they opened up. A father spoke of his estranged son, a woman shared her struggles of pretending to fit an image she could never live up to, another member of the crowd talked about a lost opportunity for love simply because they were afraid of rejection. With each story, a collective weight lifted, replaced by an air of clarity and understanding. As the stories poured forth, Alice's heart raced. It felt magical and terrifying all at once. They were creating a bond that had been dormant for so long. Finally, as the sun began to dip lower in the sky, painting the hall with warm hues, Alice felt a surge of courage. "I have something to share too," she said, stepping into the circle formed by the others. "For years, I thought I had to prove my worth by pleasing everyone. It took me so long to realize that the only person I needed to please was myself." The crowd drew closer, surrounded her with nodding heads and supportive smiles. Her vulnerability encouraged others still holding back to lean in, to join the conversation, pushing boundaries she never thought could be pushed. But before they could speak again, a sudden noise interrupted. A loud crash echoed from outside, shattering the intimacy they had just built. Gasps followed, and heads turned towards the source of the commotion. "What was that?" Marianne asked, her face now clouded with concern. Alice felt a new wave of fear wash over her. With everything they had just shared, this invasive moment was threatening to rip apart the fragile connection they'd begun to forge. As she turned toward the noise, her heart raced anew. What awaited them outside? Would it stand in the way of their emerging courage, or would it catapult them further into the uncertainty they had just begun to explore? The tension hung thick in the air, and Alice could only wonder, was that unexpected noise about to change everything, once again? The crash echoed again, followed by hurried footsteps, anxiety threading through the crowd. Alice's gaze flickered to Marianne, who wrung her hands, eyes wide and fearful. The moment of shared vulnerability felt so fragile now, like glass on the verge of shattering. "Should we check?" someone whispered, shifting nervously. "I don't know if we should," another voice hesitated, but curiosity mixed with concern turned heads toward Alice. She felt the weight of their eyes, their hopes resting upon her. "Maybe we should," Alice finally said, her voice quieter than she intended but steady. "We need to know what's happening." With a collective breath, the group edged toward the door. An air of solidarity wrapped around them. They were in this together, facing the unknown. Heartbeats quickened as Alice pushed the door open, revealing a scene that contrasted sharply with the warmth inside. Outside, a broken trash can lay strewn across the pavement, cans rolling away in disarray. A bike, abandoned in haste, lay on its side, and at the center, a young girl, no more than 11, stood with wide, terrified eyes. Her breathing came in quick, panicked gasps. "What happened?" Alice crouched down to meet her gaze. "I was trying to ride my bike, and I crashed." The girl looked around, her expression a mix of fear and embarrassment. "I didn't mean to mess up your meeting." Alice's heart lurched. "You didn't mess up anything, honey. It's okay." Members of the group started to gather around, drawn in by the girl's distress, the earlier tension shifting. The father who had spoken earlier knelt beside Alice. "Hey there, what's your name?" he asked gently. "Emma," the girl replied, wiping tears away with the back of her hand. "Emma, it's okay to feel scared when you fall," he continued, his voice soothing. "Is anything hurt?" "No, just my pride," she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. Alice smiled, seeing so much of her own fears reflected in the girl's eyes. "You're brave for coming out here all on your own. Want some help getting your bike back up?" With a nod, Emma shifted her weight, still shaky but drawing strength from those around her. Together, they righted the bike, a simple act that sparked an unexpected warmth among the crowd. One by one, they shared their own stories of being afraid, of falling down, and standing back up just like Emma. They spoke of times they felt alone, times they needed someone to show up, just as they had for her. "That's the thing about falling, it can hurt, but it also reminds us we aren't alone," Alice said, her voice vibrant with encouragement. For a moment, the group laughed and chatted, the earlier fears melting away into a shared understanding. Marianne stepped forward and crouched down, too. "I think it's time for a cheer," she declared, her spirit catching. With unsure giggles, Emma joined in. "What cheer?" the elder man initiated, "for every fall." Others chimed in, "We rise again." The cheers echoed through the street, surprising even Alice. It was joy mixed into compassion, hope woven into strength. They were a community now, each story a thread in a larger tapestry of connection. As the dust settled around them, Alice's heart swelled. This was more than a gathering, it was a beginning. They had faced the unexpected together, turning fear into unity. But just as laughter filled the air again, a distant sound cut through the blare of an approaching siren. Alice's smile faltered. "What's happening now?" The siren grew closer, a reminder that the outside world still buzzed with chaos. She held her breath, uncertainty bubbling beneath her resolve. Would this siren bring more questions, more struggles, or would it further weave their newfound fabric of courage? The moment hung delicately, and Alice's thoughts raced what awaited them next. The siren echoed lightly, intermingling with the warmth of camaraderie they had just forged. A palpable tension loomed, and Alice held her breath, waiting for the truth to unfold. As the police car rolled into view, its blue lights casting intermittent shadows over the bright pavement, emotions swirled in the air. It parked a few feet away, and two uniformed officers stepped out, eyes scanning the crowd for signs of trouble. Alice felt the sting of anxiety, her heart pounding louder than before. What had started as a celebration of truth was now draped in unexpected tension. She exchanged glances with Ruth, whose mind seemed sharp and ready for whatever curveball life threw at them. "Is everything okay here?" one officer inquired, a calm but authoritative tone ringing through the whispers. Emma, still wrapping her hands around her bike, appeared both frightened and vulnerable as the officer approached. Alice stepped forward. "We're all good, officer. Just helping Emma here after a little tumble." The officer smiled, but his eyes scrutinized them more closely. "Just making sure, we got reports about some disturbances in the neighborhood. Lots of commotion, thought we'd check it out." A wave of exasperation swept over Alice. Here they were, finding healing in vulnerability, and yet that same old expectation of conformity hung in the air like a dark cloud. She could sense the judgment from familiar faces, each vying for recognition, anxious about appearances. But then she looked at Emma, who steadily held her bike, cheek flushed with small embarrassment but bolstered by newfound confidence. Maybe it's time to turn the tables, Alice thought. Let us show them what we've built. It's up to us to push fear back, to demand acceptance. In a moment of clarity, Alice stepped beside Emma. "We're just out here sharing stories, sharing love," she declared, her voice ringing strong. "Isn't that what a community should be about?" The officer looked between Alice and the crowd, sensing the shift. "All right. Just remember, we're on your side," he said, nodding with understanding, "as long as everything remains peaceful." Relief washed over Alice, little by little. The officer's response served as a reflection of their community, a growing support system, despite the setbacks. As the officers walked away, the knot of anxiety loosened within Alice. This was the moment to expand on what they had ignited. She turned back to the group, feeling the collective breath they all seemed to hold together. "Let us not allow fear to govern our hearts anymore," Alice spoke up again, the passion within her pulsating. "If we keep sharing our pieces, we build something greater than ourselves. Each one of us matters." The crowd seemed to swell at her words, bright eyes lighting up with understanding. Ruth stepped forward, placing a firm hand on Alice's shoulder. "We can do this. Let us keep celebrating each other," Ruth encouraged. This show of support ignited a spark. People began to speak out, sharing. "I too felt lost," began one voice. Another added, "I've lived in fear of judgment." The burden of the past unfurled, the room filled with messy, raw truths that began to bind them together in an unbreakable way. As they owned their stories, Alice saw Emma step beside her bike, an encouraging smile radiating from her small frame. "That's right, Emma." Alice beamed as the girl's timid words grew stronger. "You're brave standing here." A ripple of affirmation spread. Each confession unveiled more layers of the fabric they were weaving, connections stitching together their vulnerabilities into something beautiful and powerful. Then came a surprise. A voice echoed up, standing apart. "I'm not perfect, but I want to learn." A timid man raised a hand from the side, his tone vulnerable yet earnest. "I may not understand all your truths, but I want to. I promise to listen." The air changed again, an invitation to redemption. Others echoed his sentiment, followers willing to take steps toward acceptance. The crowd began to nod, sharing laughter, stories, hope, knitting together bonds stronger than dictated traditions, sewing resilience into their shared narrative. Alice could feel a swell of joy and unity radiating from them all. Outside influences faded, they were there, in that moment, intertwining their narratives into a community, carving out new truths. Together they chose authenticity over illusion. Douglas, the elder man, stepped out again. "Then let us hold each other accountable, shall we?" he proposed, drawing applauses as heads turned, enthusiasm fluttering anew. Alice's heart swelled. This was a pivotal moment, a promise forged not merely in words but hills worth of shared experiences. And then, Emma's voice, singular and brave, soared above the crowd again. Can we have a group hug? Laughter erupted, echoing through newfound connections, and as if the universe aligned, everyone moved closer, arms extending, wrapping around each other, erasing boundaries that had once felt impenetrable. Alice stood at the center, enveloped in warmth, the miracle of community enveloping her like an embrace. For the first time in a long while, she felt at home, embraced by the love that they had collectively chosen to nurture, a vibrant and electric pulse in the air, a promise of change, transformation, and a brighter future. At that moment, she realized they were more than individuals, they were a family. They were a community united in their truth, shaking off the weight of the past, walking hand in hand into the future. Alice's heart radiated joy, knowing this was just the beginning of a powerful journey. And just like that, the fracture of past expectations led them to something infinitely more precious. This was hope. And they were ready to share it with the world. Subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss the next exclusive stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and show your support, it really makes a difference. Comment your reactions and feelings about the ending, I want to hear your thoughts. And don't wait not even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this transformation. This is the moment to rally together.